and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts, because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Noah. I'm going to be leading this barn raising, but I can't do it alone. Joining me tonight are two men whose beards would make them fit right in with the Amish, and a third whose understanding of technology would. Cecil, Eli, and Tom.
Hello.
My beard is both business and party up front. Thank you very much.
Exactly, yes.
It is just so hard to find a good Luddite group these days.
Yeah, man. Gotta go to MySpace.
Says a guy who doesn't live in South Georgia.
You should try Meetup, Tom.
All right, so before we dive into this subject this week, I want to take a second to thank our patrons. Non-patrons, we've already lost the opening sketch. Soon, budget cuts will come for the mid-sketch and then the opening theme. Before you know it, there's nothing left of the show but me correcting Tom about something unimportant and Cecil sighing at a joke he had to cut. And the only thing standing between us and that horrible fate are our patrons. So if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around to the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Cecil, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today, we are going to be talking about the Amish.
Oh, awesome. All right, so Tom, you read the Wikipedia article, or a parchment, if you wanted to stay thematic, I guess. Are you ready to regale us?
Well, this horse isn't going to buggy whip itself, Noah.
All right, so who are the Amish?
Well, the Amish have a reputation for being the quaint, furniture building, barn raising innovators of the neckbeard. And for many, the Amish have even become something of a tourist attraction. A visit to Pennsylvania Dutch country is often a trip to rubberneck a horse and buggy or buy apple pies from the OG Americana handmaidens. Stores across America, or at least the Midwest, proudly declare the sale of Amish furniture, as if to suggest that the construction of a table by a religious cult that eschews zippers will yield a higher quality of construction. And there is a pervasive cultural feeling that the Amish are just, well, simple country folk, plain-natured and good-hearted, hard-working, salt-of-the-earth types whose very existence romantically calls to mind a simpler America. And this, like all myths of the kinder, gentler, more noble religious extremists, simply has no teeth, much like many of the Amish.
Has there ever been a driver who thought, ooh, I get to ride behind a buggy? What a delight. Amazing.
Okay. The question I have is, if Heath was Amish, would he notice? At this
would
point?
we notice?
Could we do an undercover boss situation, maybe?
All right, but let's cut our teeth on some history, since we still have that option. The term Amish was first used in 1710 by opponents of some long-dead leader of the Anabaptist movement, and the term was definitely a pejorative. There was a schism among the Anabaptists at the time over the preferred treatment of fallen believers. One group, the Emmentaler's, were of the belief that the fallen among them should be refused communion, but otherwise be allowed to eat food, while the opposition, the Amish, believed that the fallen believer should be shunned completely, including refusing to eat and share common meals with them. And so the intellectual and moral birthplace of the Amish began with that kindest and gentlest refusal to break bread or commune in any way with those they could not religiously tolerate.
It sounds slightly more tolerant than Mike Pence treats women that aren't his wife, though.
Man, that's true.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of mad that history contains a group of people called the Emmentalers that didn't, have telekinesis and speak in a single voice in a semicircular room or something,
It's kind of a cheesy name, to be honest. Now firmly established as the protectors of shunning as a meritorious moral act, the Amish began migrating to Pennsylvania from Switzerland in the early 18th century. In America, they hoped to buy land and avoid religious persecution so they could persecute religiously in peace and harmony. And between 1717 and 1750, about 500 Amish made their way to America and ultimately settled in Lancaster County. These would be known as the Old Order. A second wave of around 1,500 arrived in America in the mid-19th century, and they populated parts of Ohio, Illinois, Iowa, and southern Ontario, though they were generally more liberal and did not join forces with the Old Order Amish.
Look, I get where you're coming from, Jebediah, but steel axes on the horse carts are the way of the future, and we have to be willing to change with the times.
Not that wrong. And I will say here that as a rule, the Amish are free to fuck right off and not be Amish if they so choose, or to fuck right off and be Amish, but differently as well.
Well, yeah, no, that's not a rule. That's a law. They can't not let you do that.
And after 1850, some of the Amish congregations began to get on each other's nerves, and conferences were held to discuss how best to handle the pressures and tensions that were beginning to encroach on Amish society. But for some of the old order types, even the conferences themselves were seen as far too progressive, and the more old school, old order guys boycotted the conferences, while the more progressively minded broke off and formed the Mennonites. Which is all to say that if you want to understand just how wildly conservative the Amish are, the fucking Mennonites became their version of the Green Party.
Mennonite sounds like an ancient people that really like speed stick deodorant.
Ooh, sure.
I bet they don't smell like that, though.
They sure don't.
And while the Amish were all too happy to be isolationists from modern society, World War I really helped solidify it. With the war came the massive suppression of the German language, which the Amish and the Mennonites largely spoke. That language shift among the larger local culture in Pennsylvania away from German to exclusively English further created a barrier between the Amish and the larger world.
Look, the unvaccinated child slaves you sell to men quadruple their age, I can understand. But Schmetterling, that's how you say butterfly? Come on, that's awful. Word.
It's such a dumb thing we do. Though. We get mad at a country, so we take it out on their language and their fried potato sticks. America's so fucking stupid.
All right. In World War II, that would also have a dramatic impact on the Amish population. The Amish have a steadfast refusal to engage in military service. And many young men from within the Amish community ended up in the civilian public service, working in forestry or hospitals. These men, often working side by side with the more progressive Mennonites, as well as those from the outside world, refused to return to the Amish church and community after their service.
Like, don't get me wrong, Mom. Amish is great, but wait until I tell you about literally anything else.
Seems like a hell of a long con to pretend you're Amish just to get out of fighting a war, but you got to respect that kind of dedication, man. Really, genuinely.
Exactly, yeah. Plus, we don't look super fondly on the folks who chose to vote present about the Holocaust, so I'm not...
And outside of World War II, the rise of the automobile also caused a schism in the Amish church. Some saw the car as a revolutionary technological achievement that would fundamentally reshape American life, work, and culture, while others saw the automobile as something to fear and avoid.
$20 says Tom's about to tell us how those last guys were right.
Okay, no. Technology is like music. If it came out after I graduated high school, that's what makes it bad. Okay?
There it is. We found it.
Anyway, the Amish who made allowances for the existence of reality broke off, and they became the Beachy Amish, which is an adorable name for Midwesterners to take up. The Beachy Amish also had a schism, and now there's a faction called the Old Beachy Amish, which sounds like a very upsetting name for a weird nudist colony.
Yeah, and lots of very specific shaving going on there. Like, your hoo-ha has a beard but no mustache? I am actually aroused by that. I'm aroused by that.
All right, yeah.
And all of this, again, is just to say that the Amish historically are just as rife with division and strife as any other religious movement whose initial and primary purpose for being was to isolate from society so they could isolate their internal enemies from their own society. And for reasons inexplicable, the United States caters to this. In 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court exempted Amish children from compulsory education laws past the 8th grade, allowing the Amish the God-given freedom to educationally neglect their kids after the age of 13, ensuring that their children won't have the tools to be functionally independent if they ever choose to leave the cult.
Oh, you want to chain their brains to your home and culture. Yeah, that's fine. I thought you guys were doing something barbaric, but yeah, no, you can absolutely...
Yeah, the Supreme Court is like, well, but who are we to tell them that their lifestyle is the wrong one and ours is the right? And we're like, the ones with our pants zipped up. I don't get the fucking question.
It's very super simple. That's not like a hard question even.
We should also note here the moment in time when the old order Amish began their rejection of technology. Now, obviously, the Amish never rejected all of technology. They only really began their systemic and ideological rejection in the early part of the 20th century. First, in fact, they rejected the telephone, then cars, as previously discussed, followed by tractors, radios, and then just pretty much everything else from there, except for when they don't, which, as we'll discuss, is whenever it turns out it's convenient for them.
Yeah.
Religiously, the Amish rejection of the value of the individual over community motivates the intentional spurning of labor-saving technologies. So the more laborious things are, the more they must rely upon their community. So they've built a world where just everything is annoying and sweaty and difficult, so they can all be annoyed and sweaty and difficult and tired, but in togetherness.
Yeah, and that enhances the joy of collective sweatiness like proximity. So, yeah.
They reject electric power lines specifically because the Bible, which, by the way, did not in any way predict electricity, says in Romans that you shall not be, quote, conformed to the world.
Oh, that's where they went with that. Okay.
End quote. And somehow that means you can't use the power grid.
Sure.
Photographs are avoided to avoid the sin of vanity, and anything that might spark competition for status also has to be scrupulously avoided.
Right. Except when they don't do those things because they live on Earth and interact constantly with society. What they don't do is contribute to those things is what they don't do.
They make chairs.
They're bad chairs.
They are bad chairs. I just threw away an Amish dining set not that long ago. It's a piece of shit.
And they're lacquered with our shit. It's fine. We're getting to it. I'm jumping ahead. I'm spoiling the second half. I'm sorry.
I have to call myself out for a moment here, though, and admit that my entire life until I researched this essay, I believed that the Amish eschewing of zippers was part of their broader technological rejection, but it is not. And it's not just zippers. Old Order Amish don't use zippers, but they also avoid Velcro and even buttons, declaring them all ostentatious. Instead, Old Order Amish close their garments with hook and eye enclosures, which are obviously much less sinful than some dirty button penetrating that buttonhole like a filthy whore.
How repressed do you have to be to think that every time you put on a t-shirt, you're like fisting two different people? Like, it's super weird, man.
Or how many buttons did a guy walk in wearing one day that they were like, all right, well, there it is, Jebediah. We can't have buttons anymore. It's very obvious. You look like
just
Elton
one guy
John.
tracing that button over and over and over, playing around the crest of that button, you know?
Now, officially, you are not Amish until you choose to be Amish. That happens after baptism, generally sometime around 16, sometimes as late as 23. Once baptized, the faithful are bound to the unwritten rules which strictly govern Amish life. This means, among many other things, that they must marry within the Amish community. Now, the practice of only allowing for marriage within a specific group or community is called endogamy. And when your community starts with only 500 people, and those 500 split up because of internal divisions, and you start your endogamous breeding pool with only actually about 200 people, you're going to create a community that reads like a Heath Enright browser history.
Cheese recipes?
Elizabeth Warren deepfakes?
Upsetting questions about race.
Ooh, good one. Good
It
one.
really took a turn.
Maybe show up next
Man.
time, Heath. All right.
I'm like, he likes cheese. And Eli's like, he's going to start a race war.
The result is that there are a number of genetic disorders that are disproportionately prevalent among the inbreeding Amish, including one genetic disorder that only exists among the Amish. Dwarfism, Tay-Sachs, maple syrup urine
What now?
disease. Yep.
Wow.
As well as metabolic disorders plague the Amish, and since they cannot inject new genes into their pool of breeding candidates, and they don't believe in using genetic testing, there is no chance of avoiding creating children with profoundly devastating genetic disorders. This entirely preventable suffering is, of course, chalked up to God's will, and the mortality rate of Amish children is severely out of step with the general population.
All right, y'all. I thought Tom made up maple syrup urine disease until I just Googled it. And I, for one, want to start a petition to give that tragic condition a name that is way less simultaneously hilarious and terrifying.
Yeah. At the very least, let's get a click-through going on the Wikipedia page, right? Like an "Are you sure?" button.
And while we're on this subject, we need to talk teeth. I alluded to it in the intro, but dentures among very young Amish people are really weirdly common. The water used by the Amish lacks fluoridation, and the Amish don't routinely avail themselves of dental care. In fact, nearly a third of all Amish children have never seen a dentist. And for many Amish children and young people, this lack of care and attention means a staggering amount of tooth decay. But that's not really the root of the issue. The Amish think of dental care as cosmetic. And remember that anything that celebrates vanity of the individual is verboten for the Amish, so rather than take care of their chompers, they very often just pull those fuckers out when they become a problem. And as a result, many very young people within the Amish community have few or none of their actual teeth.
All right, well, the Amish have my teeth, Tom's fear of new technology. I guess we're going to find out what they have in common with Cecil and Eli on the other side of Apropos of Nothing. Excuse me, sir. Sorry to bother you, but my car broke down like 5 miles down the road, and I was wondering. I'm sorry. Why are you dressed like that?
Dressed like what, brother?
Like that, like with the hat and the suspenders and stuff. Are you in like a pilgrim band?
Nay, brother. I am Amish. We reject all modernity, including the debauchery and flourish of modern dress.
Wow. So how do you guys get around?
Oh, horse and buggy, of course.
Amazing. How do you do that without roads?
Oh, no, we use the roads.
The roads made by like steamrollers and jackhammers and shit?
Yeah, yep, those ones.
Okay. Well, I guess still, milling your own steel for your buggies must be what most of your time is spent doing, right? I mean, what do you guys do if you don't have an iron deposit nearby?
No, we buy steel and most of our other materials
from the modern world?
Mm-hmm. Yep, sometimes.
Got it. Well, hey, I still got to say, living off the land, survival farming in Pennsylvania, I mean, starvation must be rampant. So I got to give it to you guys there. Right?
Yes, indeed. I mean, we also sell infrared heaters on TV.
Infrared what? So what?
We don't make the heaters. We just make the wood box that goes on the outside of the infrared.
Which are then sold on television?
Yep, they're sold on television for the most part. Yep.
Sounds a little like you might be a self-eliminated plague, man.
What?
I said, can I have a ride back to my car?
Sure, we can take my bicycle.
Oh, come on.
It's a shitty bicycle. It's bad. It's a bad bicycle.
And we're back, but don't worry. If there's one thing you can say about the Amish, it's that they're always exactly where you left them. So what's next, Tom?
All right, for the Amish, there's nothing more important than the rules of the church, the Ordnung. These are the unwritten, but not informal rules the community must live by. And twice a year, all the members of the church within a given district must all agree on the rules. And these rules govern everything to which technologies are prohibited and under what limitations, rules, and exceptions. I mentioned before that the Amish won't allow themselves to be connected to the grid, but many Amish communities still use power tools, often relying on generators to power them, or they just use pneumatic tools. But that Amish craftsman dining room table you bought wasn't built any differently than any other table. They sometimes all gather around and agree that, yeah, they can use solar panels if they feel like there's a need. So they have a no electricity except for when yes electricity kind of a rule.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, not to be a broken record, but it's the contributing to society that they're against. It's not the taking.
No.
And that's not at all uncommon. There is a lot of skirting of the rules through a lot of like loophole letter of the law type stuff. It's not uncommon to see Amish folks using a fucking iPhone at the farmer's market to take payments because they routinely rewrite their rules to create a distinction between using modern shit when at work versus when they're at home. And while we tend to think of the Amish trundling about in a horse and buggy, most have embraced riding in cars, even if they cannot own or drive one, which has resulted in Amish cab services proliferating among communities of the Amish. And while it's not uncommon in Amish country to encounter the horse and buggy, it is also not uncommon to just see an Amish adherent sitting in a fucking Uber on an iPhone on their commute home, where they then have to ditch the phone and pretend it's the past now.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure this is already in everybody's mind, but let me just spell it out in case it isn't. What this amounts to is a restriction on women and children using the technology, right? And men doing whatever the fuck they decided to allow themselves to do.
Exactly.
And speaking of the horse and buggy situation, those damn things are death traps. Funny enough, drunk driving is not uncommon among the Amish. And accidents involving cars or trucks versus, horses and buggies are nearly always devastating because of fucking course they are.
Right?
But don't delude yourself into thinking that all that reliance on horses means that they give a shit about the animals. The Amish are notoriously insensitive to the suffering of their horses. And in researching this topic, I cannot count the number of stories I encountered detailing the mistreatment of animals perpetrated by the Amish.
So, okay, rewind. When they get into a drunk driving crash with a buggy, did both the driver and the horse get blitzed? I don't understand how that happens.
And do you exchange insurance information with the guy or the horse? These are the questions.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you. See that horse trying to walk with one hoof in front of the other as it's walking? It can't do it. Can't do it.
You know what
It's trying
insurance
to
they
wrap
have?
its giant horse mouth around the breathalyzer to blow it. Just-
You know the insurance they use is Guy Colt.
That was actually good.
Thank you.
Was it?
It was Eli good.
Grading on a curve.
And since no one knows inbreeding like the Amish, we need to talk now about the Amish puppy mills.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, a little bit. You see, it's not just quaint but hideous Cracker Barrel knockoff furniture that the Amish produce. In Ohio, fully 98% of the puppy mills are run by the Amish. In Indiana, it's 97%, 63% in Pennsylvania. In Lancaster County alone, the Amish run an estimated 600 unlicensed dog breeding facilities.
Jesus.
These dogs are just regarded as a cash crop by the Amish, and conditions are generally appalling, with some breeders in possession of over 1,000 animals. In at least one instance, a mass culling of puppies was performed in one of these breeding mills to avoid vaccination efforts for those dogs.
Jesus fucking Christ. I feel like if your lifestyle leads to an anti-vax puppy holocaust, you rethink it, no?
You'd think. You'd hope.
No. And as bucolic as it may seem on the outside, the Amish are a nightmare for the environment. Their farms are run without adhering to EPA standards and best practices. And as a result, their fences are often cheaply or improperly built and maintained, and their cows just wander around and shit everywhere, turning the waterways into shit-slicked E. coli slip and slides. It's gotten so bad that major algae blooms in the Chesapeake Bay have been attributed to their waste runoff. And their farming practices are so outmoded and out of date with current research, the land that they till is subject to nutrient deficiencies as well as serious soil erosion.
Right, which is why multiple states have had to come in and redo the water and soil for the Amish for them, like fucking overlords in a lazy sci-fi short story. Okay, we'll fix it for you. You can keep enslaving your women and children.
Amish farming feels like it would be against the immodesty rules anyway. They're like fine with finger blasting the ground before you drop your seeds into it. I don't think so.
Being a woman in the Amish community is also a fucking horror in all the ways that you would imagine and that are not appropriate for a fun comedy show. So we're not going to go into detail there, but you can fill in all the blanks and you would be right.
No, I wouldn't.
But what we have to talk about now is the Amish rite of passage known as Rumspringa. Rumspringa just means adolescence, and this period typically begins around the age of 16, and it ends when the adolescent either chooses to be baptized as Amish or to leave the community and be shunned. As much as it's often portrayed in media as like Amish spring break gone wild, it's not usually that way. Although a small percentage of Amish adolescents might drive a car or otherwise engage in non-Amish or English behaviors, for the most part, Rumspringa is a relatively sedate affair, and nearly all of them will find their way to baptism and a life of frighteningly awful facial hair.
Right. But first, a bunch of them visit the toy store where Heath, Noah, and I used to work. Like a bunch. It's real. There's a lot of them.
And they gather around, and you know that you can get away with a bunch of weird lies about life in the outside world, but somehow you summon the willpower not to. And maybe most of the time you summon the willpower
I was
not
going to
to.
say, no, I'll tell some stories out of turn here.
And of course, if the choice has been made not to be baptized, it's time to shun. And remember that shunning is so important for the Amish that this is pretty much why the Amish are even a thing. Shunning in the Amish community is scorched earth, total isolation and rejection. A shunned person within the Amish community cannot share meals with that community. Community members will effectively treat the shunned as if they had died, sometimes mourning for the loss of the shunned. The shunned is cut off from every avenue of solace, comfort, and communication within a community that exists pretty much solely for its own community. It is a brutal and cruel punishment that the Amish have fought very, very hard to maintain.
As someone with serious scorched earth pathways in my own personal life, I'm going to say, Tom, not all shunners, okay? Not all shunners.
Hey, no arguments from him, Cecil. I thought he was talking about how he ends relationships for a second there. I was worried. I'm
It's called an ending for a reason, Eli.
He just hugs you until you die, Eli. That's how he ends. Oh,
I wish.
he pets you way too hard one time and you're dead.
Tom, I break up with you.
We got it. So there is, however, hope for the abandoned. If shunned, all that is necessary is for the shunned party to repent. Repentance and forgiveness are cornerstones to Amish life. And while this sounds nice, it's not. Forcing someone to beg and plead for forgiveness in order to not lose literally everything they've ever known is not an act of magnanimous mercy.
He even let me lick his boots.
Exactly. But as bad as that is, it's actually quite a bit worse, because embedded in all of this is the Amish belief that justice be handled entirely in-house, with repentance seen as the only real goal. And what this means in effect, and from the stories that I've read, is that a shitload of horrible assholes commit like Amish on Amish crimes, and the authorities are never called. They're not involved. Instead, a big, heartfelt, "Sorry, Jesus, my bad," gets you literally out of jail.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Tom's talking about things like child rape and murder, just in case you were picturing, hilarious low-tech spy versus spy antics, which is what I was hoping that was going on there. That would be awesome.
And look, maybe all of this is a very, very cynical take.
It's
Maybe
not.
a kinder reading of the Amish would allow me to better appreciate several generations of inbreds running their puppy mills and abusing their women and children, but I guess I'm not desperate enough yet to fawn over their ugly furniture and their mealy roadside tomatoes sold to me by neck-bearded
Tomatoes suck.
sold to me by neck-bearded religious zealots that America has adopted as their Rockwellian vision of a simplicity. So if you still want to travel out to the Pennsylvania Dutch country and rubberneck a religious cult churn their butter, who am I to judge?
And if you had to summarize what you've learned in one sentence, what would it be?
It's me. I'm the one to judge.
Yes, you are.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the quiz?
I am.
All right, Tom, what's the most famous Amish childhood storybook character? A, Barney. B,
Barney.
B, Sylvester the cat. C, Expungebob. Or D, Jiminy Ricketts.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, God, Jiminy Ricketts it is. That's all day long. So you almost had me with Barney, but it's Jiminy
It is
Ricketts.
Jiminy Ricketts.
I knew it.
All right, I got one for you, Tom. What would be as equally sensitive and descriptive a name for a disease about syrupy discharge as maple syrup urine disease?
Oh, God.
A, the thicker dicker upper. A, B, kludge sludge that won't budge.
Ooh.
Or C, fecal treacle.
Oh, shit. Fecal treacle.
Gotta be right.
It's
Yeah.
fecal treacle. That's genius
It
right
is,
there.
in fact. As a matter of fact, I changed the whole wording of the question so that fecal treacle would also make sense. It wouldn't just be a piss thing. Yes, that is correct.
That's great.
All right, Tom, what song do Amish people dance to at their wedding? A, My Endless Luddite. B, Shunway or another. Or C, Cocomelon. If you know about the part Tom skipped, you get it. It's
Fucking Cocomelon.
all right, there it is. You get it.
I know it. I feel it in my heart. It's
Fantastic.
fucking Cocomelon.
Cecil, I want you to write an essay.
Sounds
How
great.
about that?
Amazing.
All right. Well, for Cecil, Eli, and Tom, I'm Noah. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We're going to be back next week. And by then, Cecil will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, be sure to check out more of Tom and Cecil on Cognitive Dissonance, more of Eli and me on God-Awful Movies, and more of ads on Dear Old Dads. And if you'd like to hear it, and if you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod, or leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. If you want to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com. All right, well, thanks for the ride back to my car.
No problem, brother. Remember, walk in the light.
Mm-hmm. Was that Grinder?
Grinding is Amish.
Sure. Okay.